All right, good evening and welcome to week number 3 of Life Under the Sun, a study through the book of Ecclesiastes. Now, first things first, how is audio? Can you hear me? Can you see me? I actually follow along a little bit as best I can, but sometimes it doesn't follow along perfect. So, like on my follow along on YouTube, it's about a minute and a half behind, which is never good. So I'm going to sit here and wait till somebody can confirm to me that they actually see and hear me. Last week we were moving along, and then somebody told me that there was no audio. So all good. All right, thank you, Emily, for letting me know there's no audio. As you can see, as many of you can probably see, we have gotten our first shipment of Pioneer swag. So I went all out today. I have on a Pioneer hat. I have a Pioneer shirt, which I've been repping all day. I also have this is a long sleeve. We've had short sleeves before, but this is a long sleeve. I'm not sure which way to go with it here. A long sleeve Pioneer t-shirt. This is old school, but I have an old school Pioneer mug today as well. So I'll take a sip out of that. Daniel says, "What was that?" I don't know. What did you hear? I don't hear the same things or see the same things that you do, so I am not 100% sure. And I'm trying to wait for some confirmation on YouTube. If somebody on YouTube can confirm that everything is all right over there. Anybody, somebody. Usually it takes a little bit, but usually my family kicks in and says it's good, or somebody does, but up to this point, I have not seen any such thing, and so I don't want to get started too early. I just saw something that says something about my stream. I can't see it now. Something about an error in my stream, so that's never good. So maybe if somebody could shoot over to YouTube, my regulars that are on Facebook. It's usually the other way around. It's usually Facebook has, YouTube is working now, is out for a minute. Okay, so I've been, usually it's Facebook that has been an issue, YouTube's been good, and so now it's YouTube being an issue and Facebook being good. Alright, so Fred Clayton over here says, "Evening, Pastor," or one of the Claytons does. I never know who is who here. But somebody says hello over here, so I'm going to keep checking some of these things. Okay, here we go. Howdy. All right, we're getting some answers over here, so hopefully the stream is okay. YouTube is working now. Hopefully. Again, sometimes it's a crazy thing. I just don't have any control over a lot of it. And so hopefully you guys are okay there. Frozen or stopped? Question mark. You're asking me the question? See, this is the fun thing. This is always the fun thing when you're doing it here by yourself. So I don't know if that's a question or a comment, if it's frozen or stopped. If it is frozen or stopped and you're on YouTube, the best thing to do may be tonight to go to Facebook. I haven't heard anything from my family, so that worries me because usually my kids... okay, there she goes. Finally, Cassie doesn't message on YouTube, but she texts me. She knows has my phone here. And so she says, "It went out, but you're good now. Now it's back on." All right, people are saying now it's back on. So hopefully there won't be too many issues like that. If you have multiple electronics in your house, and especially if you have kids, you probably know what this is like. Up until we start, my kids have been doing, playing some online games, and then I want them on here, so they're like on different, they're on different things following along, so they can comment, plus they're watching, and we're trying to stream, and so we got all these different things going on, and so sometimes you don't know how much of our internet, how much of our bandwidth is being taken up, and so we try to take care of all that. But, okay, Cassie says it's good. I see some people on, okay, so this is weird. She says she's messaged a lot on YouTube. I just have not gotten them. Oh, so that's going to be fun. All right. Well, anyway, as I was saying, if you happen to be watching the new Pioneer swag, I sent an email if you're part of Pioneer, an email today with links and ways you can purchase that, and then we can even reimburse you for some of that. We discussed that, and so showed some of those things off. We've changed some of the things already. I'm going to probably get another one of these that just says Pioneer Baptist Church here as opposed to just the logo, and so look forward to doing those. And we're going to jump into some... Okay, here we go. Now I'm getting some of these. You're good now. You're back. Came back. Here on YouTube. Said stream was violating policy. It's because of the audio. Hi, Josiah. Good. All right, here we go. It looks like we're doing better now. Always fun. So thank you for sticking with us. Thank you for joining in. And so we see these messages now, so I'm glad that we are good to go. Again, if you want to get any of this Pioneer swag, I sent an email out today, a way to do it. And a lot of other people have reached out to me and said, how do we do it? Or, hey, I just got some today, or even sent some pictures to me, so that's been kind of cool to see. And anyway, so just wanted to make mention of that because it was kind of an exciting day. It came much faster than I expected it to as well. But welcome to Life Under the Sun, or actually Wednesday Night Live. Life Under the Sun is the Ecclesiastes study part of it. But let's jump into some of these other segments that we've been doing. The very first one is the bestest. If this is your first time here with us on Wednesday Night Live, this is interactive. So if you're on Facebook or YouTube, we want you to comment. We want to hear what you have to say. We want to hear your thoughts and all of those kinds of things. And so please interact. Please talk for us and let me know what is going on in your mind. We've talked about the best desserts. We talked about the best Mexican food. Today, I think I remember discussing something very similar to this in our Sunday night Q&A, but I want to hear a little bit more from you all. This is the one that I thought I would throw out there for tonight, and that is the best book you have read. The best book that you have read. And so there is the question for tonight. I'll wait for some responses. The best book you've read. If you want to limit it to, within the last year, you're welcome to. Maybe. Oh, and by the way, the Bible doesn't count. The Bible doesn't count. We all understand that. And so maybe some of you are already typing that out. And so I put a pause on it. That does not count. And so you have to pick a different book. What's the bestest book you've ever read? I'll wait and see. Buying some time. Who's going to be the first to answer? See, sometimes what I have to do is get all the gift cards, right, and be like, all right, first person to answer, boom, because maybe we just don't have a bunch of readers, and maybe I'm having lag again on your answers, which very well could be the case, and that'll make for a fun, interactive evening if you guys are typing out loads of replies, and I'm not seeing any of them. And so, here we go. Raising God's Kids in Sin City, most helpful this past year with Owen. Yes, I believe, if I remember correctly, Dave Tice wrote that book because he graduated from college and then went straight to Las Vegas and started Liberty Baptist Church in Las Vegas. And so it's a good book. I have it right here in my bookcase right next to me. So we have one answer. Let me check here really quickly. If you're on Facebook especially, let me know. I'm refreshing. I might have to refresh YouTube on a regular basis because it seems to be an issue with commenting for some reason. So let's see what we got going on here. Waiting for answers. Chronicles of Narnia. Very true. I feel like I saw it just recently in one of my kids' rooms or something like that. Like maybe one of them was picking it up to start reading. I'm not sure. Always enjoy reading those. All right, here we go. Okay, finally getting them. Lord of the Rings. Kristen says, I agree. I will actually say I enjoyed reading The Hobbit more than reading Lord of the Rings, but I enjoyed Lord of the Rings movies better than The Hobbit. Let's see here. Gabe, White Fang, which he is currently reading. So he's enjoying reading White Fang. It's always interesting to hear him come down at dinner time or something like that and talk about different things that are going on in the book. Josiah, Calvin and Hobbes, classic newspaper cartoons. The books are excellent. So yeah, we enjoy reading those as well. Let's see here, the Left Behind series. Lots and lots of people enjoy doing that. Terry Cross, Alexander the Terrible, Horrible, Very No Good, Very Bad Day. Yes, that's a good one as well, with a movie adaptation too. Josiah also says Garfield. That is very true. Nancy Drew mystery books. Yes, I knew so many people. And on the flip side, the Hardy Boys, right? So many people enjoyed reading Hardy Boys, myself included, my children included. Let's see here. Hard to argue the Book of the Millennium, Lord of the Rings, but I'll go with Heaven by Randy Alcorn. Alexander the Terrible, Horrible, No Good, Very Bad Day. So here are some reading options for you if maybe you haven't done some reading lately. You're looking for something good to read. Here you go. Unbroken was great also as well. Yes, Eric, I got that as a Christmas gift and read it in no time. It was a great book to read. Really, really enjoyed that. Speaking of which, Eric, and I say this, and it's multiple people, I have a book that belongs to you that I've been reading slowly. I think the same thing can both be said for Anita and Bill Carley. I think they both give me a book that I have. So, moral of the story, don't give me a book, or it may be forever till you get it back. If life is a bowl of cherries, why I'm in the pits. That's interesting. I'll have to check that one out. All right, keep them coming. We're going to move on to the next segment, and that is the Life Hacks segment. Life Hacks segment, just some general knowledge maybe to help you sometime along the way in life. And I've seen this one a couple times. I just need to remember to use it. I've heard it. I've known it. I just need to remember to use it. And here it is. Did you know that you can use chips, Doritos, Fritos, to start a fire? The fats, the oils, and the other awful ingredients that make up chips make it very flammable. So it actually works as really good kindling if you can't get a fire, or maybe all the firewood around you is wet, and so those are things that you struggle to get going with. Maybe you didn't have any newspaper or something like that. If you have a bag of chips, you can actually dump those on the fire, light them up, and they're good and flammable. So there is a life hack that maybe will help you out. Sugar Creek Gang, yes, I remember those as well. For the fact of the day. Fact of the day, remember last time I told you astronauts say that space smells like steak. Who would have ever known? Not me. I've never been to space, but that's what they say. Fact of the day hits a little bit closer to home. I found this one really, really interesting when I was reading, and maybe you will as well. I'd be interested to know how many of you already knew this. If you knew this already, please comment. Let me know. I think it'd be really interesting to hear. And that is this. The largest living organism in the world is a fungus. And it is in the Mauler National Forest in the Blue Mountains of Oregon, right here. It covers over 2,200 acres, and it is still growing. It's a fungus that manifests itself above ground, oftentimes in mushrooms, but most of it consists of underground roots and connections that go all over that national forest in the Blue Mountains. And it is covering 2,200 acres already and still growing. It's the largest living organism in the world. Oh, Emily knew that. See, that's what happens when you're smart and you live in Oregon. Fred and Colleen knew that. See, or some of you, if you just were hanging out long enough, it's maybe. Has anybody actually ever gone over there and seen pieces or parts of it? So that's kind of interesting. So Timothy knew that. Okay, not Fred and Colleen. So. My dad is a mushroom fanatic. Okay, fair enough. That would make sense. That would make a lot of sense. And so, yeah, when I was reading interesting facts, I thought that one was a really interesting one, especially since it hits so close to home. Looks like a Photoshop job to me. That giant mushroom might be. No comments on that. I'm not saying that that's an accurate description of the living organism that's over there in the Blue Mountains, but sometimes you gotta get something that catches the eye. You know what I'm saying? So there you go. The bestest books. Life hack. If you need a fire, hopefully you got maybe a Dorito or some sort of Frito in your pocket. And the largest living Oregon right here in the state of Oregon. So Eric brings up a good question. I do think for a long time there was a certain tree or groups of trees that it was, and then they lost some of them, because I was reading a little bit about it. I don't know if it's the quake and aspen trees in Colorado or not, but I do remember either that people thinking that, or that was the case, and then some of them died out, or they lost some of them, or fires or something like that took some of them out. So that was an interesting one too. If you have a copy of God's Word, let's go to the book of Ecclesiastes. Obviously, I'll have them here on the screen for you. Ecclesiastes chapter 2. It's taken us 2 weeks to get through chapter 1. I don't know how far we'll get into Ecclesiastes chapter 2, but as we closed out last week, we kind of talked about how the scientist in Solomon says that the world is a closed circle, it's a closed system, and nothing changes. The historian in Solomon said life is a closed book and there's nothing new. The philosopher in Solomon said life is full of deep problems and there are no new answers. But we closed out reminding you from the words of 1 Corinthians chapter 1 and verse 24 that says, Christ, the power of God and the wisdom of God. And when you feel like life is just taking you in circles, we can turn to Him, because He has the power to break out of what is a closed system. He has the power to make all things new. He has wisdom to give the answers to life. That doesn't mean that He's got to give them all to us. But we learned that is true about our God. As we come to Ecclesiastes chapter 2, be ready, because I'm going to have a lot of questions, especially here in the beginning. When we come to Ecclesiastes chapter 2, we see that Solomon is going to experiment. He's going to experiment with life. And really what he's doing is he's looking for a way to find satisfaction and to satisfy the meaning for life. And so he decides, basically what he says, I'm going to try everything. Everything that life has, I'm going to do it to see what brings real joy, to see what brings real satisfaction. And I begin to think to myself, boy, if that isn't true about people today, people that are looking for satisfaction, people that are looking for some sort of inner peace or something like that, and they're trying everything in the world today. So the first question I thought when I was going through this, you'll see it here on the screen, what are things that you see people give their lives to in order to try to find joy and fulfillment? And by the way, we see it in all walks of life and in all over the place, but I would be interested in just to, each of us kind of move in our own different circles with our jobs and our homes and our neighborhoods and our interactions and those kinds of things. And so maybe what you see is different, a little bit different than what other people see. And so I'd be interested to hear some of the responses to that. What are things you see people give their lives to in order to try to find joy and fulfillment in their life? And as I was thinking about this, I was thinking for some reason, it doesn't always seem to happen, but it seems to really manifest itself in those moments between maybe when you're in college through young adult, like that 18 to 25, 18 to 30 range, somewhere in there where, they just, and obviously there was a huge revolution for this in the 60s and into the 70s, and some of you are answering questions here. Some people sport, some people work, fitness, relationships, their children. I mean, there's all sorts of their jobs. I'm seeing these answers come rolling in, keep giving them, and so people just give their life to these things in order to try to find fulfillment in life. And we're going to see Solomon do the exact same thing. He's trying to unlock the key to what brings real joy and real fulfillment in life. And so he basically says, I'm going to give everything a try. Emily says relationships, hobbies, even volunteer work, which by the way is a good thing. And some of these things we're going to talk about are good things. Work is a good thing. Your family is a good thing. Career success, the hearts here say, and some of these things are really good things. And so I want to make that known. Just because they aren't maybe what ultimately fulfills or gives joy doesn't mean they're in and of themselves bad things. We're going to see Solomon give himself specifically to two main things. And I'm going to read verses 1 through 3. I want you to read together with me. Anita makes a good point, to be a big music star. And think about this as well, especially young kids that are so impressionable, that are, watching these people on YouTube or on TV or other places become famous. They're thinking, that's my way. That's my way to make money. That's my way to become famous. Eric says jobs, sports, hobbies. But I'm going to read verses 1 through 3 of Ecclesiastes chapter 2. And there's going to be two main categories. And actually, I think we've hit on them already here, but I'm going to label them differently. And I want you, as we read these 3 verses, to see if you can pinpoint the ones that Solomon is speaking of. So here we go. Ready? Ecclesiastes chapter 2, verses 1 through 3 says, I said in mine heart, go to now, I will prove thee with mirth. Therefore, enjoy pleasure. And behold, this also is vanity. I said of laughter, it is mad, and of mirth, what doeth it? Verse 3. I sought in mine heart to give myself unto wine, yet acquainting my heart with wisdom, and to lay hold on folly, till I might see what was that good for the Son of Men, which they do under heaven all the days of their life. And as you continue to read through Ecclesiastes chapter 2, you'll notice 2 major themes jump out for what Solomon was hitting at. So here's the question again. What 2 avenues do we see Solomon pursuing here? And I'll say it again, you guys have already hit really directly on one, and some of your answers can be kind of combined together for the other one. And while you're thinking about that, let me speak about this as well. We may have seen a word in there that may have jumped out to you and go, I don't know that word, I don't recognize that word, I haven't heard that word, and that is the word mirth. What is mirth? Very simply, I'll give this answer to you. Mirth is the idea of gladness or pleasure, and so that's what he's saying there. So Terry and Michelle are the first ones to answer. Pleasure and wisdom. So there's no doubt about it that the very first one that that Solomon hits on, I have labeled it this way: enjoyment, pleasure, mirth. And again, we've talked about some of these things that you guys have mentioned here can cover those subjects. And I was thinking about pleasure and enjoying life, and this question came to mind because I think it's important for us to be honest about it and to wrestle with it. And that is this question. I want to hear your answers to it, maybe some of your scriptural responses. Do you think God intended for life to be enjoyed? And you may have a thought or an opinion on it, but and I didn't write it on here, but here's kind of the backup question to that. According to your answer, can you think of a Bible verse that backs that thought up? Can you think of a Bible verse that backs that thought up? So Gabe is the first one to jump in and says yes. So Gabe does. That's one vote for yes, that God does intend for life to be enjoyed. So what about the rest of you? And if so, can you think of a Bible verse that maybe would go along with that to support that? And so I'll continue to give you here just a minute. So there are a couple of, when we're reading the book of Ecclesiastes, there are some enjoyments that Solomon mentions very specifically, and we'll look at them here in just a minute. So Anita brings up a good point, right? And so Jesus even talks about giving us life and giving to us abundantly. Psalm 35 and verse 27. You can go read that in the Word of God yourself. If you have a copy of God's Word there, Terry Michelle Hart, give that one. I think most of us would agree that God's intention was for us to enjoy life. One of the first ones that came to mind when I was thinking about that is 1 Timothy chapter 6 and verse 17. It should be here on the screen. It says, charge them that are rich in this world, that they be not high-minded, nor trust in uncertain riches, but in the living God, who giveth us richly all things to enjoy. Right? Azariah brings up a good point as well, talking about just in the very beginning of the Garden of Eden, that God's desire was for them to enjoy what was there and to enjoy the work of their hands. But here, it tells us God gives us richly all things to enjoy. God's intention is for us to enjoy life. Gabe talks about a merry heart doeth good like a medicine, right? I don't think there's any doubt about it that when we read through the Bible, God's desire is for us to enjoy life. But we're going to talk a little bit later on about when that pursuit becomes the primary pursuit of our life. That's when things start to fall apart. That's when there is an issue. There are two primary enjoyments that Solomon mentions here. And I just kind of packaged them together: laughter and wine. Right? He basically says, look in verse 2. He said, "I said of laughter, it was mad, and of mirth, what doeth it?" In the end, he actually calls all of it vanity. He says, I've pursued these enjoyments. And think about this for a second. We think about Solomon. He is being entertained as the king by the best entertainers in the land. It would be like if he had his own personal, Las Vegas show or whatever it may be every single night. He had every TV studio producing things just for his intake and for his entertainment, and they're all there for himself. He is getting, without a doubt, the best entertainment that there is out there. He's also getting the best food. He's also getting the best drink. He's getting the best of all of those things. And at the end of it, he says, it's mad, it's crazy. And he says, of mirth, or of joy, of pleasure, of gladness, what doeth it? What good is it? And so we just talked about this, but I want to circle back around to it. Why is it bad, or why is it a dangerous endeavor to build your life on or around enjoyment? And I'm asked this question. I'm going to share a couple of them with you that have stood out to me. But I want us to think about this. Can you think of some reasons that it's bad or dangerous to build your life on or around enjoyment or the pursuit of enjoyment? I'm going to wait here for a second. Katie shares a verse there with us as well. Some of you have been doing. And so I'm going to... just waiting for... So now we've almost switched. I'm getting all my answers now from my YouTube people, but I'm not quite seeing quite as much from my Facebook people. So let me know if everything's good on that side. So again, so Cassie says there's no certainty in it. It comes and it goes. It comes and it goes, and so certainly that there's one. Eric kind of continues that sentiment. It's not long standing, and it will keep. And this is the big one, and I think this is kind of where they're both going here. And I'm going to talk about it in just a second. It requires you to keep seeking other avenues, and we're gonna talk. I'm gonna look at that here in just a minute. But that is one of the things about it. It's gonna keep you. You're just gonna continue down this trail that never ends. Emily says it's not our purpose in life, so we'll never be fulfilled in only pursuing enjoyment. That's true. It can all be gone in an instant, whether or not you have anything to do with it. It's true. It can be gone in a moment. Focus on enjoyment is selfish. We're going to talk about that. It has very little eternal value. Terry Cross brings a good verse. For what will it profit a man if he gain the whole world but lose his own soul? Kristen brings up a good point as well. If you're reading these comments, building life around enjoyment leads to building life around me and how I feel. Man, you guys, I'm telling you, you guys have nailed it tonight. Because I want to share with you some of the thoughts that I wrote down as well. The first issue, the first danger is that it's self-centered. In the end, this pursuit is usually very self-centered and selfish. And what people don't realize in the moment is that typically destroys true joy. Selfish. And you want to know something that destroys genuine joy is selfishness. Find a selfish person and you'll find somebody who has very little joy in life. And so that's one of we think, oh, if I pursue my own enjoyment, then man, my life is going to be full. Really what ends up happening is it's very it becomes self-centered and selfish. And we forget about the other people around us, and so what ends up happening is we really lose our joy. Now another thing is, and I think Eric had hit on this one, and Cassie did as well. It's a never-ending pursuit. It's a never-ending pursuit. We both physically we understand how our physical body works, but we have, and I don't know all the details, but I think. When we have a sense of excitement, there's our brain or whatever it is, releases some sort of drug that makes us feel good. I don't remember if it's a dopamine or something like that, but it it makes us feel good for that moment, and then all of a sudden we're chasing that all of the time. That's why you don't ride one roller coaster and go, wow, that was fun. I don't ever want. Well, some people do. Some people go, I don't ever want to ride one of those ever again. But what happens is I want that again, and then we want to make it more dangerous, and we want to make it scarier, and we want to make it we want it to be a bigger rush, and it's just this constant pursuit that is never fulfilled. And so you're looking for fulfillment in that, and then all of a sudden it never stops. And then some other people hit on this one as well. It does not appeal to the whole person. It only appeals to part of me. And that is, I think the Hearts mentioned that it has little eternal value. That only appeals to this part of me, to the flesh part of me, to the, it has no eternal value. It doesn't do anything for me beyond that moment. And so, and the Claytons bring up a good point. Life has good times and bad times. And so if you're building your life on those good times, there's going to be a lot of struggle in life, because not everything is always perfect. And so this is the conclusion Solomon comes to. I've pursued enjoyment, pleasure, laughter. And by the way, again, those aren't necessarily bad things. God wants us to enjoy life. But if we build our life on the pursuit of those things, it'll never fulfill us. Now, the next one may surprise you. And we're going to look at them in verses 4 through 11, because the next one is much more noble. Especially in America, it is highly looked upon. And just like pleasure and enjoyment, there's nothing wrong with it. As a matter of fact, I think it's one of the very good characteristics of most Americans. And the second thing that Solomon looks at here and says, I'm going to pursue this, is, and just to match the enjoyment, the E part of it, I'm going to refer to it as this: employment. Employment. Let's look at verses 4 through 11, I think it is, okay? He says this: I made me great works. I builded me houses. I planted me vineyards. I made me gardens and orchards, and I planted trees in them of all kinds of fruits. I made me pools of water to water therewith the woods that bringeth forth trees. I got me servants and maidens, and had servants born in my house. Also I had great possessions of great and small cattle above all that were in Jerusalem before me. I gathered me also silver and gold, and the peculiar treasure of kings and of the provinces. I got me men singers and women singers, and the delights of the sons of men, and as musical instruments, and that of all sorts. So I was great, and increased more than all that were before me in Jerusalem. Also my wisdom remained with me. And whatsoever mine eyes desired, I kept not from me. I withheld not my heart from any joy, for my heart rejoiced in all my labor, and this was my portion of all my labor. Then I looked on all the works that my hands had wrought, and on the labor that I had labored to do. And behold, All was vanity and vexation of spirit, and there was no profit under the sun. I mean, he says, you know what? I'm done with fooling around. I'm done with just trying to entertain myself and enjoy myself. Now I'm going to get to work. Look, he says again in verses 4-6, I made me great works. I built houses. I planted vineyards. I made gardens and orchards, trees of all kinds of fruit. I made me pools of water to water therewith the woods that bringeth forth trees. I mean, he did all of those things. And not only did he have a work, I mean, he wasn't just some entrepreneur that was that was doing all the work by himself. He was building almost like this business empire, because he also got workers, not just work, but workers. Look at verse 7. I got me servants and maidens, had servants born in my house. Also I had great possessions of great and small cattle above all that were in Jerusalem before me. So I want you to think about this. He was successful in his employment. He was successful in his work. He was successful in his business. And at the end of this, he still was unhappy. He was still unhappy. And I began to think, man, why? And the reality is activity alone does not bring lasting pleasure. Look what happens when the project is finished. Look at verses 9 and 10. I'm sorry, let me see here. Let me see. I have it here. Here we go. Verses 9 and 10. He says, so I was great and increased more than all that were before me in Jerusalem. Also my wisdom remained with me. And whatsoever mine eye desired, I kept not from me. I withheld not my heart from any joy. My heart rejoiced in all my labor. And this was my portion of all my labor. You know what he found joy in? He started to find some joy in the labor, in the work. Nobody on here really knows this except for maybe Daniel. And don't worry, I'm going to ask some more questions, so hang with me. Some of you know parts of this. Every year we have a theme at church, right? And so I'll always build something as stage decor for our church. One year it was it was a big signs that said "Hope in Thy Word" or "Hope in Thy Word." Last year it was the signs that said "Behold our God." There's been some other ones along the way. I actually built one this year, just haven't brought it yet because the rain hasn't held off on a Sunday morning yet for me when I've been ready. And I enjoy the labor of doing that. It's almost like a labor of love. I enjoy the labor of doing it more than I actually do the finished product. The finished product is something that a lot of times some of us guys just laughed about, because I don't claim to be a handy person or any of those kinds of things. But I enjoy spending a few moments in my garage working on those things. It was just the together sign. That's right. I knew there was another one in there with all the strings that were tied together to spell out together. And so we'll work on those things, and I enjoy. But you know what? Afterwards, it was a pain because the pins would pop out, the string would go all over the place. Maintaining it was not as fun as building it. And here he is. And he comes to the end of it in verse 11, and he says, Then I looked on all the works that my hands had wrought, and on the labor that I had labored to do, and behold, all was vanity and vexation of spirit. There was no profit under the sun. There's no profit under the sun. In other words, I don't remember who said this. Somebody one time said, success is full of promise until men get it. And again, just like enjoyment, don't think that I am condemning work. As a matter of fact, the Bible speaks clearly about us having a proper work ethic and laboring and not eating unless we work or labor. And so that's not what I'm saying here. And again, one of the hard parts about Ecclesiastes is not drawing conclusions based upon what Solomon is saying in the moment. Sometimes it seems like it's this stream of consciousness writing from Solomon, and he's just kind of getting it all out there. But what Solomon is doing here is something that we see people still do today. Is that they're trying to find life's purpose and pleasure and fulfillment through enjoyment or employment. And the funny thing is, it's two opposite ends of the spectrum. Some people are trying to find it in being lazy. I'm not gonna work. I'm just gonna entertain myself. I'm gonna play video games all day. I'm gonna watch TV all day. I'm gonna mooch off mom and dad till I'm 30, 40, whatever the case may be. And then some people are on the opposite end of the spectrum. And again, it appears to be more noble, but they're workaholics. And neither of those things are truly fulfilling. And Solomon came to that realization. And if we have time this week, we'll dig down into the details of even why employment isn't as well. But look what he says here in verse 12. I think this is an important transitional verse in the chapter. He says this, he says, "And I turn myself to behold wisdom and madness and folly. For what can the man do that cometh after the king? Even that which hath been already done." He's asking the question, he says, what's the person who comes after me? I've tried everything. I've built everything. I've watched everything. I've enjoyed everything. I've done everything. I've eaten everything. I've drank. What's the person that comes after me going to do with all of these things that I've done? But he uses a very interesting phrase, and this is where I need you to interact with me again, okay? He says, "I turn myself to behold." And so here's the question. What do you think? What do you think the phrase, "I turn myself to behold" means? We actually have a phrase in our English language that, or an idea that's very similar to this. And I want to, again, this is our opportunities where you don't worry about potentially being wrong. Who knows? You might be right. When he says, "I turn myself to behold," what do you think he's saying here? I'm going to give you some moments. I'll take a sip of coffee while I wait. Who's going to be the first one to chime in? Maybe you are chiming in. I have been seeing him come in, so hopefully everything's all right there. I turn myself, maybe some of you are Googling it. Maybe some of you have gone and gotten some sort of Bible dictionary or something like that to help you out. Maybe nobody wants to take a guess. I'll wait. I thought to myself. That's a good way to put it. I thought to myself. That's a good stab at it, and I would say that there's some truth to that. I thought to myself. So we think again. I turned myself to behold. I turned myself. I thought to myself. I think I looked and considered. I paused, stood back to take a look at everything. Now, okay, we start piecing all of these together, and we're starting to understand what Solomon is saying. The best way, the words that I could put it in is Solomon is saying, I stopped and looked at it from a different perspective. And I think at times it's good to look at things from a different perspective. And that's what Solomon is really saying here. I'm going to pause for just a minute, and I'm going to look at this from a different perspective. I'm going to look at it from a different angle. And so this is important, right? Now you might have to put your thinking caps on here, but if those of you that have been with us through 3 weeks should be able to do this. Maybe a tough question, but up to this point, think about this for a minute. Up to this point, from what perspective has Solomon been looking at life? It's a phrase we've used, I think, every single week. What perspective has Solomon been looking at life up to this point? From what angle, from what perspective has he been looking at life? Again, when we read chapter 1, even chapter 2, he has a very it seems very morose, very sad, morbid, even just it always seems there you go, under the sun. His perspective has always been under the sun. Remember that's the perspective we've talked about. This is life under the sun. This is where we live. We live under the sun. His own perspective. That's very true. That's exactly his own. Right. Just under the sun, what's right there in front of me, what I can see in black and white. We've talked about, though, having a different perspective, having a godly perspective, and an earthly perspective, a human pleasure perspective, a human outward perspective, rather than a godly one. You guys are hitting on it. This is exactly what he's talking about. He says, I've been looking at it this way. Now I'm going to look at it from a different viewpoint. And notice what he says in verses 12 through 13. And what we're going to do is we'll read verses 12 through 13. What new perspective is he going to take? Now, don't automatically think it's just going to be, this is the new perspective. The new perspective is now going to be above the sun. Look at what he says. He's now going to look at it. He's going to look at it from a different angle, a little bit of a different angle. Not a total, not a 180 angle, but just a little bit of a different angle. Look at verses 12 and 13. He says, I turn myself to behold wisdom and madness and folly. For what can the man do that cometh after the king, even that which hath been already? Then I saw that wisdom excelleth folly, as far as light excelleth darkness. Actually, I wanted us to read verses 12 through 23. I don't know if we continue to go here. Let me see. I do. The wise man's eyes are in his head, but the foolish walketh in darkness. And I myself perceived also that one event happeneth to them all. Then said I in my heart, as it happeneth to the fool, so it happeneth even to me. And why was I the more wise? Then I said in my heart that this is also vanity. For there is no remembrance of the wise more than of the fool forever, seeing that which now is and the days to come shall all be forgotten. And how dieth the wise man? As the fool. Therefore I hated life, because the work that is wrought under the sun is grievous unto me, for all is vanity and vexation of spirit. Yea, I hated all my labor, which I had taken under the sun, because I should not leave it unto the man that shall be after me. And who knoweth whether he shall be a wise man or a fool? Yet shall he have rule over all my labor, wherein I have labored, and wherein I have showed myself wise under the sun. This is also vanity. Therefore I went about to cause my heart to despair of all the labor which I took under the sun. For there is a man whose labor is in wisdom, and in knowledge, and in equity. Yet to a man that hath not labored therein shall I leave it for his portion. There also is vanity and great evil. For what hath man of all his labor, and the vexation of his heart, wherein he hath labored under the sun? For all his days are sorrows, and his travail grief. Yea, his heart taketh not to rest in the night. This is also vanity. So he still kind of comes to somewhat of the same conclusion here, but he's looking at it now he changes perspective a little bit. Does anybody know, there's a key verse, I'm going to go back and see if I can find it here. Here it is. Verse 14 is important. He says, this wise man's eyes are in his head, but the fool walketh in darkness. And I myself perceived also that one event happeneth to them all. I think the key to seeing the new perspective of Solomon is in that verse. He says, I myself perceived also that one event happeneth to them all. Think about this for a minute. What event happens to all of us? We've talked about this before. Church, Sunday mornings, Sunday nights, maybe even here on in our times here on live streams. But he's now beginning to look at it through the prism of this event. You might want to take a guess what it is. Anita hits it. Death. Death happens to all of us. That's the one event that happens to them all. And he changes his perspective a little bit, and he's going to look at wisdom, and he's going to look at all of these things in light of the certainty of death. He realizes death is real. And you guys, I see some of you guys are hitting it on here. Okay, he says, but here's the struggle he has. When he says that, he comes to realization when we read these verses. I'm going to take time to read them again. Here's the frustrating part to him. He goes, wait a second. The wise person dies and the foolish person dies. So he asks himself, what value is there? What value is there in gaining wisdom? This is the question he starts to think about. Since both the wise and the fool die, what's the value in wisdom? So the heart say, is there any greater value to wisdom, work, pleasure, versus the opposite that lasts beyond this life? Beyond this life. Death is now the perspective he's looking at, and he goes, whether I make all of this money or whether I make little money, whether I'm really wise or I'm foolish, I'm still going to die. And so this is now how he starts to look at life, and he begins to wrestle with it. He's wondering, if wise and fools die, then what's the value in wisdom? And so I want to pose this question to you for just a second. How do wisdom and foolishness, or how do the wise and the foolish look at life differently? How do Kristen, ever the mathematics and money mind, death and taxes? Fair enough, Kristen, you are right. That made me laugh. But how do wisdom and foolishness look at life differently? Because a foolish person and a wise person will look at life differently. As a matter of fact, he says one walks in the light and one walks in darkness. And so they definitely look at him differently. Wisdom can be left behind, but he even hits on this point. He says, but who's to say that the wisdom I leave behind is actually going to be heeded? How many times have we had somebody say to us, I want to tell you this, I want to impart this wisdom to you because I made this mistake and I don't want you to make the same mistake. And those people that we're talking to just turn around and still make the same mistake. Even though we've given them the wisdom. He says that I might have this wisdom and I might even pass it down to people behind me, but there's no guarantee that they're going to heed this wisdom. Sometimes they still make the same mistakes. But here's the thing. Wisdom sees death coming and prepares accordingly. Whereas a fool who walks in darkness is caught totally unprepared. Right? And so that is the part of an answer to Solomon's question is that. Part of the value in wisdom is that a wise person realizes death is coming and I need to prepare accordingly. A fool pays zero attention to it and doesn't care. The struggle, though, that Solomon still wrestles with is the burden of life. In that it takes, for some people, it takes so long. We're not born with wisdom, right? Wisdom comes with time, age, experience, knowledge, some of those things all mixed together, and we understand that. I think part of what Solomon wrestles with is, man, it takes somebody decades to gain wisdom. We talk about the wisdom person having a hoary head. The Bible talks about having white hair. It takes somebody until they're old and have white hair to really start to understand how to live life. And then what happens? They die. The thing that they need to live life properly, they don't get until they're old. And then once they finally get it, they die. And so I think Solomon still wrestles and struggles with that idea. And they both live and die. And so when we read in verse 17, he says, notice the words he says in verse 17, therefore I hated life. I mean, this is rough. He hated life, but he didn't want to die, right? He didn't want to die, but he hated life. And so death was the one thing that he really wanted to avoid. And so he starts to come to these conclusions about life, that it's vanity and vexation of spirit. And by the way, I don't think those are the conclusions that God wants us to come to about life. But I do want us to see some considerations, and we're going to try to get through verse 23 here, and then we'll be done. I want us to see some things he says in verses 18 through 23 that he considers about wealth and wisdom and his work. In verse 18 says, Yea, I hated all my labor which I had taken under the sun, because I should leave it unto the man that shall be after me. This is why I hated it, because I'm going to leave it to somebody that comes after me. And who knoweth whether he shall be a wise man or a fool? Yet shall he have rule over all my labor wherein I have labored, and wherein I have showed myself wise under the sun. That's also vanity. Therefore I went about to cause my heart to despair of all the labor which I took under the sun. For there is a man whose labor is in wisdom and in knowledge and in equity, yet to a man that hath not labored therein shall he leave it for his portion. There also is vanity and a great evil. For what hath man of all his labor, and the vexation of his heart wherein he hath labored under the sun? For all his days are sorrows, and his travails grief. Yea, his heart taketh not rest in the night. This is also vanity. We see here that even the wealth that his labor brought him, he began to despise it. He hated it. And by the way, this may come as a shock to many people today. Here is a king who has tried every type of entertainment, who has done every type of labor, who has made all sorts of money. And this may come as a shock to people today, but his labor and his wealth got him to a point where he says, you know what, I hate that stuff as well. I hate it. And I think there are a couple of reasons that he came to this conclusion. I've seen some of you already commented on it tonight. One of the first reasons that he hated it so much is because you can't keep it. You can't keep it. So I labor all this time for this stuff, and I don't get to keep it. Verse 18, Yea, I hated all my labor which I had taken under the sun, because I should leave it unto the man that shall be after me. I don't get to keep it. Somebody else behind me is going to have it. Somebody one time said, money is an article which may be used as a universal passport to everywhere except heaven, and as a universal provider of everything except happiness. I'm going to read that again. I wish I had it on here. Money is an article which may be used as a universal passport to everywhere except heaven, and as a universal provider of everything except happiness. I want us to consider, for sake of time tonight, I'm not going to wait for too many answers because of time, but I want you to think, what are we called to do with the wealth that God has given us? Whether it's little or much. The reality is you don't get to keep it. So what's the biblical thing to do with it? Another thing he didn't like is that he couldn't protect it. He could do nothing to protect it. Look at verses 19 through 20. And who knoweth whether he shall be a wise man or a fool? The person he has to pass his money on to. I don't even know if he's going to be a wise person or foolish. Yet shall he have rule over all my labor wherein I have labored, and wherein I have showed myself wise under the sun. This is also vanity. Therefore I went about to cause my heart to despair of all the labor which I took under the sun. It's frustrating because I can't protect it. I might give it to some foolish person who blows it. By the way, this is exactly what Solomon's son Rehoboam does. Okay? He blows it. And by the way, that's also true today. You no matter what, and I'm not trying to scare you. I'm not trying to scare you, but there ain't a whole lot you can do in today's world to protect your assets. Just from people who online people who have figured out how to steal your identity online, from people who have found a way to hack bank accounts and other accounts, to market volatility. The instability of at times the petrodollar and Bitcoin and things like that. I mean, so much volatility and craziness going on that you can't protect it, and it's bad enough that you don't even know what the person who you're leaving it behind to is going to do with it. They may waste it. And again, that's what Rehoboam does. And then he came to this conclusion as well. He says, and even when I have it, I can't even enjoy it like I'd like to. Verses 21 through 23 tell us that. And by the way, if you read enough from wealthy people in the world today, they'll say the same thing. The more money they have, the more stress they have. The more they worry about it, the more stress it brings them, trying to protect it, trying to even build it, they spend so much time trying to build more that they don't even get to enjoy it like they would like to. And so at this point, it appears, again, that Solomon is just unbelievably pessimistic. But he doesn't stay that way. And I know it's 7:59. Hang with me because I think we're close enough that we want to get to the end here, okay? Look at verses 24 through 26. He says this, as he's starting to conclude the chapter. He says, "There's nothing better for a man than that he should eat and drink, and that he should make his soul enjoy good in his labor. This also I saw, that it was from the hand of God. For who can eat, or who else can haste hereunto more than I? For God giveth to a man that is good in his sight wisdom and knowledge and joy, but to the sinner he giveth travail, to gather and to heap up, that he may give to him that is good before God. This also is vanity and vexation of spirit." Solomon makes 6 major conclusions, or comes to 6 major conclusions in the book of Ecclesiastes. And this is the first one that he comes to. And this is kind of where we're going to bring it home. And we're going to start finishing up here. Okay. This is the first major overriding conclusion that Solomon comes to. And it's this. He said this: "Thank God for what you do have and enjoy it for his glory." Sometimes if we read what he says in these verses, we can misinterpret what he says. In verse 24 again, he says, "There's nothing better for a man than he should eat and drink, and that he should make his soul enjoy good in his labor." But notice these words. He says, "This also I saw, that it was from the hand of God." So he reminds us to thank God for the food and the drink you have, for the enjoyments in life that you do have, for the labor that you get to take part in. That's from the hand of God. That is a gift from God. The good that we do have in life, the enjoyment that we do have in life, those things are gifts from God. And so he wants us to understand that. And when you read verse 26, he says, "For God giveth to a man that is good in his sight wisdom and knowledge and joy. But to the sinner he giveth travail, to gather and to heap up, that he may give to him that is good before God. This also is vanity and vexation of spirit." In other words, God wants to give wisdom and knowledge and joy. Those things, wisdom and knowledge and joy, those things help us to appreciate the good and enjoy the good that God has given us and to take pleasure in them. For the sinner, it's different. All of these things still end up being travail. Okay? And that is vanity and vexation of spirit. These things, it's not true for those that don't know God. Those people that don't know God can have all sorts of things, but never truly have deep enjoyment and pleasure and satisfaction in them. For the lost, everything is still vanity, vexation of spirit. And so he says, but for believers, we're reminded that God gives us wisdom and knowledge and joy that helps us to enjoy and appreciate God's blessings to us and to take pleasure in them. He wanted to remind us that God gives good things. Thank God. The overwhelming, the overarching thing is, in the ups and downs of life, because they do change, God has still been good, and the things we have in life, the food and the drink, the enjoyment, the pleasure, the work, the labor of our hands, those are all gifts from God that he wants us to enjoy, but he wants us to enjoy them for his glory. Now, next week, we're going to look at chapter 3, and we'll probably look at possibly the most famous chapter in all of the book of Ecclesiastes, and that's because is it the Birds, I think, made a song out of it. And so a lot of people know it that way. But before we close tonight, I want to encourage you to do exactly what we said. Tonight, before you go to bed, I understand we live in a world where, man, sometimes life just doesn't make sense. Sometimes there seems to be more downs than there are ups. Sometimes it seems like everything we try to bring joy or fulfillment comes up short, and it does. Sometimes we try to drown out the hardships of life in entertainment or enjoyment. Sometimes we try to drown them out by occupying our minds so much with work that we don't notice them. And all of those things always come up short. What we ought to do is take the things that God has given us in this life and thank Him for it and enjoy them for His glory. That's an important part. We can enjoy them for our satisfaction, for our selfishness. That's not what He wants us to do. Enjoy them for His glory. And I pray that you'll consider that and think about that this week. Thank Him tonight and tell Him that you want to enjoy the things He's given you for His glory. As we've said every week, I always want to give an opportunity here in these last few moments for some closing thoughts on Ecclesiastes chapter 2. If you have some, you're more than welcome to share them here these next few moments. We won't stay long. You should try to keep it as close to those 7 to 8 o'clock time frame. And again, if I could ever get on here with all of my streaming and audio working properly, then we'd be good to go. So Terry and Michelle Hart there add the actual text for Psalm 35:27 that they'd mentioned earlier. God hath pleasure in the prosperity of His servants. So there you go. He does want us to enjoy life. So I don't want you to take away from here going, oh, I don't want us to take Solomon's overarching under the sun perspective. That boy, everything's just awful. Life is hard. It is. I'm not gonna deny that. But boy, God has been good. God has been good to us, and we want to thank Him and enjoy these gifts that He's given us for His glory. And so I look back and see some of these answers that you guys talk about what we're to do with the wealth that God has given us. Invest it in eternal things. Use it for His glory. Store it up in heaven. Steward it. All correct answers. And thank you for your involvement in that. Again, I hope our trip through the book of Ecclesiastes up to this point has been helpful to you. As I said before, in my study and preparation beforehand and my reading through the book of Ecclesiastes, I was amazed at how much just modern day application it has. And we see that even in this chapter, where people try to find their pleasure, their fulfillment, and their enjoyment, when really it's found not under the sun. We live life under the sun, but our genuine fulfillment and pleasure and joy don't come from anything under the sun. They come from God above. And so as we say every week, until next time, keep looking up. We'll see you next week, guys. Have a great week.